On the day of my birthday, while I eagerly awaited a gift, the room filled with laughter and applause. My cousin received a brand new Audi, wrapped with a red bow, while I was handed just €5 in a crumpled bill. Despair took over me, and at 1 a.m., with a broken heart, I blocked all my family's numbers. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. My name is Miguel. Family love can be the greatest lie of all. The next morning arrived, bringing a light that seemed to cut through my heart even more. The sun cruelly illuminated my room, as if mocking my pain. I couldn't shake the image of Lucas smiling, surrounded by compliments, while I felt invisible. The Audi, with its unmistakable shine, became a symbol of what I would never have. Sitting at the breakfast table, each bite felt heavy. My dad, Henrique, tried to make small talk, but his words sounded distant. He knew something was wrong, but he couldn't grasp the depth of my hurt. Clarice, on the other hand, sensed the tension in the air and tried to mediate, her concern evident in her gaze. "Don't you want to join us today? Lucas and the grandparents are coming for lunch," my mom asked, trying to bring some normalcy back. I wanted to scream no, that I couldn't bear the thought of seeing Lucas, but the words got stuck in my throat. What I really wanted was for her to understand the injustice I felt, but instead, I saw only hope in her eyes. "I don't feel like seeing anyone," I managed to murmur, my voice sounding weaker than I expected. She stared at me, her eyes narrowing as if trying to read my mind. "Miguel, this won't solve anything. The family needs you," she said, her calmness contrasting sharply with the storm inside me. My dad finally intervened. "Listen, son, everyone has their struggles, and it's not easy for anyone. Lucas might be the favorite now, but that doesn't define who you are." His words were kind, but the weight of my resentment made it hard to believe them. I went to my room, seeking a space where my pain could manifest uninterrupted. I closed the door and let the frustration pour out in tears. Memories of moments with my grandparents, before all this, began to surface. They were happy memories, but now stained by rivalry. I remembered when they told stories of their youth, and my heart ached at the thought that those moments might be lost forever. The afternoon dragged on, and the idea of facing Lucas made me anxious. I heard laughter and family voices, as if they were in another dimension, oblivious to my suffering. The door to my house opened, and the noise grew louder. Their presence felt like a shadow following me, constantly reminding me of my exclusion. I didn't want to go into the living room, but I also didn't want to hide forever. A part of me longed for reconciliation, for the possibility of understanding. Finally, Clarice entered my room, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Miguel, are you still upset with the grandparents?" she asked gently. I tried to find the words, but they just wouldn't come. I just wanted to be seen. I don't understand why it always feels like I'm the last one to be noticed," I vented, the tone of my voice reflecting my frustration. She sighed, realizing this wasn't a simple issue to resolve. "Sometimes people act without thinking, and that can hurt. But you are special, Miguel, and your story matters." I heard her words, but they were hard to believe. As she spoke, part of me wanted to believe that family love was real and not just a facade. What if they never see it? What if I'm just the grandkid who gets €5? Clarice looked at me with sadness. "They might not see it now, but that doesn't define who you are, and there's always time to change that perception." I sat in silence, reflecting on her words. Hours passed, and finally, lunchtime arrived. I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. Taking a deep breath, I went downstairs, where the smell of home-cooked food enveloped me. The table was full of laughter and stories, and Lucas seemed more radiant than ever, his presence dominating the room. My grandparents were there, their faces lit up, but their joy didn't bring me comfort. I felt like a stranger in my own home. As I entered the room, I was met with curious glances, as if my presence was an unexpected element in the family dynamic. "Look who decided to show up, Miguel," Lucas exclaimed, his smile seeming more like a taunt. Laughter erupted around me, and I forced a smile, even as a knot formed in my throat. Sitting at the table, I tried to ignore the feeling of being invisible. Conversations flowed, but I was distant, trapped in my own thoughts. My grandparents began talking about the Audi, sharing stories of how Lucas was learning to drive, and each word felt like a knife in my chest. A moment of silence fell when they asked if I wanted to learn too. What I really wanted was for them to acknowledge my pain, but the words got lodged in my throat. The tension was palpable, and Clarice gave me an encouraging look, as if telling me I could speak up. But the fear of being rejected and misunderstood paralyzed me. As lunch continued, I was in an internal battle, deciding whether or not to open my heart. The realization that family love wasn't one-sided, but a two-way street, began to haunt me. Was I part of the problem or part of the solution? This question echoed in my mind as the conversation at the table continued, filled with laughter and stories, while I felt increasingly distant. As laughter and stories unfolded around me, I felt the weight of my frustration growing. Each compliment directed at Lucas felt like a stab to my chest, and I couldn't understand how my own family could be so blind to my pain. The table was filled with light and joy, but I felt like a spectator in a play I hadn't chosen to act in. Clarice, my mom, cast quick glances my way, perhaps sensing that I was in a sea of turbulent emotions. I tried to smile at her, but I knew I was failing. "Don't you want to join in, Miguel?" Lucas asked, in a playful tone that only heightened my irritation. The way he addressed me, as if I were a mere side character in his success story, made my stomach churn. The Audi was just a symbol of what I already knew but didn't want to accept. I was not the favorite. I was not the chosen one. "I'm fine," I replied, trying to maintain composure, but my voice betrayed my anger. Clarice leaned forward, as if wanting to shield me from a new wave of emotions, but all I wanted was for everyone to see how unfair everything was. Henrique, my dad, who had remained silently reflective until then, finally spoke up. "Miguel, you know that family is more than just gifts," he said, his expression a mix of concern and love. Those words, although well-intentioned, sounded empty in my mind. What good was it to talk about family love when I felt so marginalized? Unable to endure the situation any longer, I decided to stand up and leave the room. I went to the garden, where the night was wrapped in a cloak of stars, but even the beauty of the sky couldn't dissipate the sadness consuming me. I sat on the bench, my thoughts swirling around how deceptive appearances could be. What seemed like a happy moment for everyone felt like a deep abyss of loneliness for me. The sounds of the party inside the house became a distant echo, and I wondered if it would be possible to rebuild the connection with my grandparents, even after having blocked their communication. After a few minutes, Clarice appeared by my side, sitting down quietly. "You can't just distance yourself from them, Miguel," she said, her voice soft, as if trying to calm a raging sea. "You know they love you, right?" I looked at her, trying to find comfort in her words, but the pain still felt strong. "Love shouldn't be a competition, Mom," I replied, my frustration spilling over. "Why can't they see how much this hurts me?" Clarice sighed, seeming to understand the depth of my wound. "I know you feel wronged, but we all make mistakes, and sometimes adults don't realize the impact of their actions." Her words resonated within me, and I realized that perhaps there was some truth in what she was saying. But why should I be the one responsible for fixing something that wasn't my fault? Fighting against what I felt was like trying to swim against a strong current. "Mom, I just wanted to be seen, to be recognized, not as an appendage to the family, but as someone who also matters," I murmured, feeling tears threatening to slip down my face. Clarice wrapped me in a tight hug, and for a moment, all my resentment seemed to dissipate. "You matter, Miguel. To me, to your dad, even to the grandparents. Sometimes we just need a little push to realize that," she said, stroking my hair. The lack of understanding I felt began to transform into a small thread of hope. I didn't need to resolve everything immediately. Reconciliation could be a gradual journey, and this first step, this conversation, could be a beginning. After some time, when my breathing calmed, I decided it was time to go back. The party was still in full swing, and I realized my heart felt lighter. As I entered, I saw Lucas telling a funny story, and the grandparents were laughing wholeheartedly. I felt an urge to join them, but I hesitated. What I really wanted was for them to notice my presence, to feel my absence when I drifted away. The scene before me seemed perfectly normal, but I needed to do something. I couldn't hide behind a wall of hurt any longer. With a bit of courage, I approached and asked, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I tried to convey firmness, although a tremor was present in my voice. The grandparents turned to me, surprised, but Lucas gave a dismissive smile. "Go ahead." "Miguel, let's see what you have to say," he teased, but I ignored his tone. The grandparents stood up and followed me to the porch, where the night breeze brought a refreshing coolness. "What's wrong, dear?" my grandma asked, her face showing concern. I looked at them, feeling the urge to open up, to expose my wounds. "I feel left out," I finally confessed, each word carrying the weight of my pain. "It's not just about the car, it's about everything." Their response didn't come immediately, but I knew that at least I had started to build a bridge. It was a small step, but it was something. Now all I needed was patience and understanding, both from them and from myself. The next day began with a mix of anxiety and hope. As I got ready for school, the weight of those words still lingered in my mind. Building a bridge. But how could I do that when all I felt was a mix of anger and sadness? Looking in the mirror, I realized that my reflection wasn't just disillusioned. It also carried a spark of determination. It was time to stop feeling like Lucas' shadow and take control of my own narrative. At school, the atmosphere felt oppressive. The conversations around me became a distant buzz. Instead of focusing on my classes, my mind wandered to what my grandparents thought of me. Did they really believe a car could replace the love I wanted to feel? The bell rang, and I dragged myself to the cafeteria, where I saw Lucas surrounded by friends, all laughing and admiring the new Audi. My heart tightened, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't let it dominate my life. During the break, I decided it was time for a confrontation. I needed to express everything I felt, not just with Lucas, but with my family. When I returned home, I found Clarice in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of home-cooked food filled the air, and for a moment, I felt a bit calmer. Her presence had always been a comfort, but I knew that to resolve the situation, I needed to be honest. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, trying to hide the tension in my voice. Clarice paused, her expression becoming serious. "About what, my son?" She turned to me, and I could see the concern in her eyes. "About Lucas, about the grandparents. I can't stand feeling belittled anymore." Her hands stopped moving, and the room fell silent. I was about to open my heart, and I knew it was a risky but necessary step. Clarice moved closer, sitting at the table and encouraging me to continue. "I feel invisible, like my achievements don't matter. Every time something good happens to Lucas, I'm reminded of how I'm not the favorite," I expressed, feeling a knot in my throat. She listened attentively, and an expression of empathy crossed her face. "Miguel, you're not less favored. Each of you has your own worth and qualities," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "But that's not how it seems, Mom. The grandparents always talk about Lucas. And I feel like I'm just a footnote in the family stories." Clarice sighed, and I saw the pain in her eyes. "I know the dynamic isn't easy, but you need to talk to them, not just to me. They need to hear how you feel." The idea of confronting my grandparents made me nervous, but it was a step I knew I had to take. After dinner, I gathered my courage and went to the couch, where Henrique was watching a game. Dad, can you stop for a second? He turned to me, a concerned expression forming on his face. Sure, son, what's up? I hesitated, but then I remembered what Clarice had said. I needed to express my feelings. About the situation with the grandparents and Lucas, I feel left out. Henrique nodded, seeming to understand the gravity of what I was saying. I didn't know you felt that way. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Frustration washed over me. I tried, but it always feels like what I feel doesn't matter. I don't want to live in this shadow anymore. He stood up and approached me. Miguel, you're important to us. Don't let this feeling consume you. We need to be a united family. After that conversation, a new determination washed over me. The next day, I decided I would visit my grandparents. I didn't know how the reception would be, but I needed to try. With my heart racing, I took the bus that would take me to their house. With each stop, my anxiety grew, but I kept my focus. What I wanted most was to be heard, to be seen. When I finally arrived, the house was just as it always was, filled with memories and laughter. But at that moment, they didn't feel welcoming. The voices of my grandparents filled the air, and as I entered, I was met with warm smiles. Miguel, what a surprise, my grandma said as my grandpa hugged me. I tried to smile back, but the knot in my throat prevented me from feeling truly welcomed. I came to talk about something that's been bothering me, I launched, and their smiles slowly faded. The atmosphere shifted, and I knew I had to be clear and honest. I feel neglected compared to Lucas. I feel like my achievements aren't valued, and that's why I distanced myself. Their expressions changed, and I could see confusion and concern on their faces. Was there something we didn't know? My grandpa asked, and I realized they were genuinely willing to listen. I laid out everything I felt, every hurt, every frustration. The conversation flowed, and the tension that had once dominated the environment began to dissipate. After long minutes, my grandpa looked me in the eyes and said, "We never wanted you to feel this way. We love you just as much as we love Lucas. It's time for us to look at this together." The feeling of relief was overwhelming, and I realized I had taken an important step towards healing the wounds that tormented me. From that moment on, I knew the rebuilding of relationships would begin, and I was ready for it. That morning dawned with a different weight in my heart. The conversation with my grandparents left me confused, but at the same time, there was a seed of hope sprouting within me. I looked out the window and saw the sun rising on the horizon, as if reminding me that new opportunities were on their way. Meanwhile, Lucas's Audi still gleamed in the garage, a symbol of what I considered life's unfairness. I began to remember a time when Lucas and I were just kids, playing together in the yard, without rivalry, just companionship. That memory gave me courage, and I realized that even though the situation seemed challenging, I wasn't alone on this journey. As I descended for breakfast, I found my mom, Clarice, setting the table with a care I had always admired. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, as if she had been waiting for me to take the first step towards reconciliation. "Good morning, Miguel. How do you feel today?" she asked, her voice soft and encouraging. I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm still thinking about what happened, but I want to try to understand it all." Clarice nodded, seeming relieved. "It's important to talk, to open your heart. Let's approach this calmly, without rushing." Meanwhile, Henrique, my dad, entered the kitchen with a worried expression. He had always been the mediator of the family, and his presence brought me a bit more comfort. "Miguel, I saw what happened, and I want you to know that I'm here to support you. Sometimes people don't realize how their actions affect others. Have you thought about talking to Lucas?" That suggestion made me hesitate. Speaking with Lucas wouldn't be easy, but at the same time, it would be a chance to express how I felt. "I think I need to, Dad. I have to try, even if it hurts." After breakfast, I gathered my courage and decided it was time to confront the situation. I left the house and headed to my grandparents' place. My heart raced, and the anxiety almost prevented me from going forward. The path seemed long, and with each step, childhood memories enveloped me, bringing a wave of nostalgia. I remembered seeing Lucas as a brother, how we always wanted to be equal, despite the difference in treatment we received. This helped me understand that my rivalry with him wasn't just about gifts, but about love and acceptance. Upon arrival, I found my grandparents in the yard, chatting peacefully. They looked at me with surprise, but soon the worried expressions were replaced with smiles. "Miguel, my dear," my grandma exclaimed, "we're so glad you came. We've been waiting for you." I calmed down upon hearing those words. "We need to talk," I said, sensing that honesty was the only way forward. They exchanged glances, and then my grandpa nodded, leading me to a table where we used to play cards. "We're ready to hear what you have to say," he said, his voice calm. I sat down and, for the first time in a long time, looked into their eyes without fear. I felt left out when I saw Lucas's gift. I don't understand why it always seems like he's the favorite, why I only got €5. The atmosphere became heavy for a moment, but I continued, feeling the need to vent. "It's not just about the Audi, it's about how I feel like I'm never enough for you." My grandparents exchanged glances again, and I realized that their reaction would be crucial. My grandma placed her hand on the table and said, "Miguel, we never wanted you to feel this way. Each of you has your value, and we love you in different but equal ways." Those words were a balm to my soul. The truth was, I needed to hear this, to understand that love can manifest in various forms, and that comparison only breeds pain. The conversation flowed, and with each word, I felt lighter. My grandpa shared stories from his childhood about how he too felt regarding his siblings, and how, over time, he learned that family love wasn't a competition. This resonated deeply within me. In a moment of vulnerability, I said, "I'm tired of feeling like this. I wish the rivalry would end." My grandpa smiled gently and declared, "Rivalry only exists if you allow it. Remember that Lucas is also your cousin, not your enemy." After some time, we decided it was necessary to summon Lucas to join us. With a mix of nerves and determination, I called him. His voice on the other end of the line was friendly, but there was a touch of curiosity. "Hey, Miguel, what's up?" I took a deep breath and said, "I want you to come over. We need to talk about us and what happened." He agreed, and my anticipation grew. I knew this would be the true test of our relationship. When Lucas arrived, the atmosphere was charged with tension. He looked at me, then at my grandparents, confused about what was happening. "What's going on, Miguel?" I was nervous, but also determined. "We need to talk about the gift you received and how I felt about it." Lucas seemed surprised, but also understanding. "I didn't know you felt that way, Miguel. To me, it was just a car. I didn't ask for it." The conversation was intense but liberating. We talked about the weight of expectations, the pressure we felt to be the favorites, and how, at some point, we forgot we were cousins who loved each other. By the end of the afternoon, as we stepped back a bit, Lucas said, "Let's try to leave this behind. We can be better together." And in that moment, I felt the rivalry begin to dissolve, giving way to a new bond that could flourish between us. What once was a feeling of inadequacy was now transforming into a new possibility of unity. Somehow, the Audi that had made me feel so small now symbolized a new chance to grow, not just as cousins, but as family. The wounds began to heal, and I knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but also with love and understanding. That afternoon began to unfold in an unexpected way. I found myself on the porch of my house, watching the leaves of the trees dance gently with the breeze. A new feeling was forming inside me, a mix of hope and determination. I knew I needed to talk to my grandparents, even if it required emotional effort. The Audi that had once symbolized a wound now seemed like an invitation for dialogue. I decided that, sooner or later, I would have to give reconciliation a chance. Clarice, my mom, appeared at the door with a look that mixed worry and affection. "Miguel, are you okay?" she asked, sitting next to me.
I knew she was trying to understand what I felt and, in a way, mediating the situation. "I'm thinking about how to reconnect with the family," I replied, trying not to let all the anguish I still carried show. Her expression softened, and I saw a glimmer of relief on her face. "That's a good start, son. Sometimes you just need to take the first step, even if it's the hardest one." As we talked, Enrique walked into the room,
bringing with him an air of seriousness. He had noticed the tension and, as a father, felt responsible for taking care of the family dynamic. "Miguel, do you remember when we were kids and we made up after fighting?" he asked, with a nostalgic smile. "Sometimes it's just an apology that can fix everything." His words resonated within me like an echo of my own insecurity. I remembered the countless times Lucas and I argued and then found a way to reconcile soon after. What had changed now? Why did everything seem so much more complicated? I needed to understand Lucas's situation too. He was the family favorite, but I knew him and understood that behind the perfect image lay immense pressure. With that in mind, I decided that when I talked to the grandparents, I would also ask how he was handling the new attention and the expectations that always seemed to loom over him. The rivalry wasn't just mine, it affected all of us in ways we weren't always capable of seeing. After a while, I decided it was time to visit my grandparents. The path to their house seemed longer than usual, and every step I took was accompanied by a whirlwind of emotions. My heart raced and my breathing became irregular. What would I say? How would I begin this conversation that could change everything? I felt I needed to prepare for any response they might give, whether warm or cold. When I arrived, the house was quiet, but I knew they were inside. With a surge of courage, I rang the doorbell. Seconds later, the door opened, and there they were, my grandparents, with expressions of surprise and concern. They hadn't expected to see me there, and I could sense hesitation in their eyes. "Hi, Grandma, Grandpa," I said, trying to convey confidence I didn't truly feel. "Hi, Miguel, what a surprise," my grandma exclaimed, trying to hide her apprehension. My grandpa, on the other hand, seemed a bit more reserved, observing me with inquisitive eyes. The atmosphere was tense. But there was an expectation in the air, and I knew this was the moment to open my heart. "I wanted to talk about what happened at the party," I started, my voice trembling but firm, "about the Audi and what it meant to me." The words flowed, and each one felt like it was lifting a weight off my chest. I felt left out, like I didn't matter as much as Lucas. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I couldn't help it. Their response didn't come immediately, but understanding glances began to emerge. My grandpa, with his wise and serene demeanor, spoke first. "Miguel, we never wanted you to feel this way. We love you and Lucas in different ways, but you are special to us in a unique way." Those words touched my heart. The idea that my worth wasn't comparable to Lucas's, but rather something of its own, began to make sense. Clarice had talked about this, but hearing it from my grandparents brought a new perspective. With that, I felt more comfortable opening up. I just wanted to be seen. I wanted to be the favorite too, even if that doesn't make sense. Henrica, who had accompanied me to the meeting, also spoke up. "We all go through moments of insecurity in family, Miguel. The important thing is that we are here now, ready to understand and support each other." His words reflected a desire for unity that, for a while, I had thought was impossible. Tears began to well up in my eyes, and I realized I wasn't alone in my pain. My grandpa looked at me with empathy and said, "Sometimes comparisons blind us to the love that already exists." The conversation flowed naturally from that point onward. We talked about memories, about good times, and about the challenges each of us faced. The rivalry I had felt seemed a distant shadow, and gradually, a sense of understanding began to prevail. My grandparents weren't perfect, but they were willing to learn and grow with me, and that meant a lot. As the day began to draw to a close, we said our goodbyes, but not before they embraced me warmly.
"I love you," I said, feeling a weight lift off my chest. To my surprise, they replied with, "We love you too, Miguel. We always will." I left their house with a sense of lightness, as if the air around me had become fresher. Arriving home, the first thing I did was seek out Lucas. He was on the couch, playing video games, and when he saw me, he smiled. "Hey, how was it?" he asked, in a lighter tone than I expected. "It was good. We needed to talk." He nodded and invited me to sit next to him. We talked about family, rivalries, and I discovered that he too had his insecurities. Instead of seeing each other as rivals, we began to see ourselves as allies. From that day on, our relationship began to change. Conversations became more frequent and sincere, and I realized there was much more at stake than just a car or the grandparents' attention. The real value lay in the bond we were building. And this union could overcome any silly competition that had existed in the past. I looked to the future with hope, knowing that together we could create a new story.